this afternoon, and is also being placed on, it was sent to you by email, those of you who are on our database, a link to a YouTube channel that you can also view the proceedings if you don't happen to get into this chat. Let me introduce a number of people who have been at the center of seeking to put this together, because it wouldn't be fair to them if I didn't do so. Let me start by introducing to you the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Embassy, Ms. Christabel Reese. Where is Christabel? Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Ambassador, Attorney General Sir George, and others. Good to see you.
There she is. And let me also introduce to you Ms. Michelle Gibbons, who is my right hand, left hand, every hand in the embassy. There she is. Where is she? I see Michelle.
Yes.
Yeah, Michelle
I'm here. Good evening, AG, Sir George, and all the participants who are on this evening.
Michelle is there. And then there is Tricia Graves Staggs, who is in the embassy, an employee of the embassy who has been also critical in putting this together. Where is Tricia? I see. Good evening, Tricia.
Good evening, Ambassador. I'm here. Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I don't see Mandisa Downs, who is our first secretary in the embassy. If Mandisa is on, please raise your hand. But these are the people, folks, who keep this together and who go to work every day in the employ and in the vanguard of looking out for the development of our people, whether they're here or whether they are in Barbados. I want to start this evening's proceedings by introducing to you the Attorney General of Barbados, who has joined us this evening. Before I formally introduce the Attorney General, let me say this event was put together because we have received no end of calls and other pieces of correspondence seeking to find out about the Republic. This particular event follows on the heels of an event that we hosted in August. The first Thursday in every month, we put together these diaspora meetings. And what we've been doing in recent time is bringing to you a person either in the private or public sector who is prominent, but also topical in what we're discussing and dealing with on these issues. We have, in August, I said it was Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostic, the Minister of Health and Wellness. This month is the Attorney General. But we have been bombarded with no end of calls and emails about the Republic, about why Barbados is taking this particular step. Why is this a good political move? Why is this a good policy move? And we thought it prudent that we should bring the Attorney General because he is best able to discuss, in my opinion, all of the elements and all of the issues surrounding why Barbados is going to become a republic on November the 30th, 2021. The Prime Minister and her cabinet, some other cabinet members have spent a long time in consultation and explaining this to the populace of Barbados. But we also thought it was important that you, the diaspora here, who, as the Prime Minister always says, must contribute to Barbados' socioeconomic development. We must reach out to you. We must have your thoughts and your ideas on how we continue to develop Barbados. And therefore, this evening, we've put this event together so that the Attorney General can come and share all of what Barbados is doing in this particular area. And in addition to that, we will give you the opportunity as well to be able to not only pose questions and comments, but also to give your thoughts about this important political direction for Barbados. Now, let me introduce to you Dale Dermot Marshall, Queen's Counsel, Honorable. Dale Marshall is the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs of Barbados. Mr. Marshall assumed office on May 25th, 2018. He coursed his secondary education at the Combermere School, up and on. He holds a LLB with honors from the University of West Indies at Cave Hill and a certificate in legal education from the Hugh Wooding Law School in Trinidad and Tobago. This is his second time serving in the position of Attorney General of Barbados, having served from February 2006 to December 2007 in the Owen Arthur administration. Marshall has also served Mr. Marshall as a government senator from 1999 to 2003, and as the chairman of the National Housing Corporation, the Urban Development Commission, and the Barbados Tourism Authority. Minister Marshall has also served as chairman of the Committee of Experts on Electronic Commerce of the Free Trade Area of the Americas, the FTAA. Mr. Marshall is an outstanding and celebrated attorney at law in Barbados who came out of private practice, and we are privileged to have him not only serving as our Attorney General, but privileged to have him here this evening. Mr. Marshall, with those words, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. But before you say anything, I just want to say one other thing. I want you folks, during the period when we get into the question and answer sessions of this, to observe proper protocol, observe positioning. We know that sometimes we can become a little bit difficult to deal with, but we want you to observe all manners and protocols as established, and we will go from there. So Attorney General, sir, to you. Oh, one of the things, if you want to speak, I was also informed that you should put your, actually, type your questions in the chat. That will signal to us and those who are directing this particular exercise your intention to speak, instead of using the raise your hand feature. So it's important. If you want to speak, and I know some people come in and out, but type your questions in the chat to signal your intention to speak. And that will allow our people to let you in, allow us to go from there or call your name. And with those words, Attorney General, the floor is yours, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Lynch. I'm really honored to have been invited by you and by your team to participate in this meeting with the diaspora in the United States. I wish I could have been there in person, but COVID, of course, restricts the possibility of travel at this time. Ambassador, I propose to be somewhat brief in my comments, not out of any disrespect, but only so as to allow for as much questions as possible. And I think that that is really what we want to get to. So I'd just like to make a few opening remarks, and then if we can, with your leave, we jump right in. I think I see questions coming in already. In 1996, Barbados transitioned, or perhaps I should say transformed, from being a colony to being an independent nation governed by an independence constitution.
That would be 66.
66. The preamble to the Constitution, after reciting some salient historical facts, goes on to say some very important words. And I quote, "Now, therefore, the people of Barbados proclaim that they are a sovereign nation." Those are important words. We proclaimed then and in our Constitution that we are a sovereign nation. And after a few more declaratory statements, the Constitution goes on to establish that document as the supreme law of the land, and goes on to establish the other rules that make up the Constitution. Perhaps it is understandable that in 1966, we, the people of Barbados, who so boldly declared that we are a sovereign nation, did not go the full extent of that statement of sovereignty, but went on to provide in section 28 of that Constitution that, and I quote again, "There shall be a Governor General of Barbados who shall be appointed by Her Majesty and shall hold office at Her Majesty's pleasure, and who shall be Her Majesty's representative in Barbados." And with that, Ambassador, guests, we followed the steps of other Commonwealth countries who became independent nations, fully responsible for their own affairs, while at the same time maintaining the umbilical cord which bound us to England by keeping the king or queen of the day as our sovereign. And in this vein, I'm sure many of you will immediately think of Canada, you'll think of Jamaica, you'll think of Trinidad and Tobago, and even Guyana. Now, some may decry the maintaining of this relationship with the Crown as an act of timidity. Others may say that we were simply being cautious. One commentator, Harold Latchman, in 1970 opined that it was not unusual for ex-British colonies on achieving independence to fashion their political institutions after those of the metropolitan country. Little wonder then that we opted for the monarchical system of government. In the decades since independence, there's been a lot of intellectual and political energy spent in debate on whether we went far enough with that independence constitution. Should we not have declared that a Bajan would be our head of state? This was also addressed significantly in the Ford Commission report of the 1990s on constitutional reform. We have debated again and again and again whether we should swear allegiance to the Queen in this modern era, because that is exactly what we do. Permit me to share with you the oath that I took most recently on the 25th of May in the year 2018. My oath of allegiance, regrettably, was not to our country, but instead, these are the words that I swore upon the Holy Bible, and I quote, I, Dale Dermont Marshall, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, according to law. So help me God. On a personal note, I would much rather have sworn that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to my country, Barbados, but instead, by law, I was bound to swear to Her Majesty the Queen, her successors and heirs. Our High Court judges take a somewhat more passionate oath upon taking judicial office. And the opening words of their oath, I do swear that I will well and truly serve our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, in the office of Judge of the High Court. That probably bears repeating. I do swear that I will well and truly serve our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, in the office of Judge of the High Court. I think I would much rather if our judges swore to truly serve our country in the office of Judge of our High Court. For some, what we are embarking on is what you would call a no-brainer. Others are critical because of an absence of consultation that they perceive to exist. Others are thinking that it is the wrong thing to do and a betrayal of our colonial heritage. But Her Excellency Dame Sandra Mason noted in the throne speech, which she delivered on the recent reopening of Parliament last year, that the father of our independence, the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, famously said that we should not be found loitering on colonial premises at closing time. Her Excellency went on to reason that having attained independence over half a century ago, our country can be in no doubt about its capacity for self-government. The time has come to fully leave our colonial past behind. Barbadians want a Barbadian head of state. Let me share with you one further fact. Before our host for tonight's meeting, Ambassador Lynch, could be appointed to be Barbados's diplomatic representative to the United States, the government of Barbados had to write to the Queen to seek her consent that he could be so appointed. Imagine that. So, what is it that we're doing? We are at the place in time and in history when we intend to act on what should be an instinctive and intuitive response. We are going to be making a Barbadian our head of state. Nothing more, nothing less. The Prime Minister put it best when addressing the country 2 weeks ago. She asked a rhetorical question. Why would we not want a Barbadian to be head of state? And if we didn't want a Barbadian to be head of state, who would we want to be a head of state? A Brazilian, perhaps? An Irishman? I think the answer to that is obvious. And that is where the question of republicanism comes in. Some of you may be wondering if we are going to be transforming completely our system of government in order to become a republic. Not at all. in order to be able to make a Barbadian a head of state, whom we will term our president, we simply move from a monarchical system where our head of state is the Queen of England to a state of legal being where our head of state will be a Barbadian and will be our president. And that's the beginning and the end of it. But in order for that to happen, we have to amend the Constitution so as to provide for Barbados to be a republic. Now, let me say that Cabinet has agreed that we will not be changing our name to the Republic of Barbados. Everyone since 1966 has called us just that, Barbados. And we don't think that we need to add any adjective or other word to our name in order to be who we are. And we will therefore not be the Republic of Barbados. We will continue to be what we are now. We will be Barbados. That speaks everything. But the term Republican comes in only because our head of state will, after November 30th of this year, be called a president. So in order to achieve or the end that we desire, that is having a Barbadian head of state, we will not call that person a governor general, we will call that person our president. And therefore we move to what is considered a presidential system of government. But what does that look like? For most of you in the United States, when you think of a presidential system of government, you think of exactly what you've been living under. The United States has a president, and the president of the United States has full executive power. That is not where we're going. We are replacing Governor General with president. But the Governor General and the president will be limited in exactly the same way. And in fact, I can tell you they will exercise exactly the same functions. Under the Constitution as it stands, our Governor General acts only upon the advice of Parliament, only upon the advice of the Prime Minister, and in some cases where statute requires the advice of the leader of the opposition or some other person or entity. So the powers of the Governor General are severely circumscribed in law. The powers of our president will be circumscribed in exactly the same way. So for those who are thinking that we will have a president who will be able to declare war, who will be able to exercise all manner of executive powers, that is not the case. Our president will continue to be ceremonial in much the same way as the Governor General is ceremonial. How will we achieve this? In order to achieve this in law, we simply need to make a few amendments to the Constitution. Now, let me say that we believe that after half a century of independence, the time is right for us to consider a new Barbados Constitution. We have 5 decades plus of experience. We can see the weaknesses in our current Constitution, and we can see areas where our current Constitution can be strengthened and can better deal with Barbados as a modern state. But that requires a large degree of consultation, including significant consultation with the diaspora. And therefore, that is an exercise that we will embark on after we get past the Republican status. The Prime Minister has indicated that immediately after this, we will begin to look at a new constitution. In fact, one was drafted as far back as in the 1990s. And so we have something that we can work with. But that is going to require a tremendous amount of consultation, and we are not at that place right now. So we'll be amending the Constitution in very limited ways to give effect to converting our head of state from being the Queen to being a Barbadian president. So you can think about it in this way. Throughout the Constitution, there are many things that the Governor General has to do. For example, she had to swear me as the Attorney General. So we will be making all of those changes that are consequential so that the powers of the Governor General, the powers currently exercised by Her Excellency, will transition over in a very seamless way to the presidency. The other thing that I'd like to explain is how the president will be chosen. And we've given this a significant amount of thought, but quite frankly, there's no sense in us trying to reinvent the wheel. Sir Henry Ford, in his work on the Constitution Commission some decades ago, looked extensively at the issue of moving to a Republican status with a Barbadian president, and they set out some principles that would guide us in how we can select that president. And quite frankly, we are going to be following those because we think that they are quite workable and quite sensible. The president will be elected by both houses of parliament. So the 30 members of parliament in the lower house, the 21 senators will meet. The term that we are using is electoral college, means something very different to what the US speak of when they talk about electoral college. But it is how Trinidad does it. They describe it as an electoral college. The two bodies will meet and will vote on who the president will be. Now, recognizing, of course, that there are instances where the opposition and the government will agree, but we must allow also for instances where they don't agree. The government will have the opportunity to nominate after consulting with the leader of the opposition. If the leader of the opposition does not find favor with our nominee, then the leader of the opposition or any other group of parliamentarians would be able to put forward another candidate, and we will simply vote to determine who the president is going to be. As far as our first president, though, the Prime Minister has indicated that Her Excellency Dame Sandra Mason has agreed to accept the nomination of the government as our first president. Now, let me make it clear. The law has not yet been passed. So the most that the Prime Minister has been able to do has been to have a discussion with Her Excellency and to find out from Her Excellency whether she would first be willing to accept the post of president when we transition, and secondly, to find out from her whether she would accept the nomination of the government. And she has very kindly and generously indicated that she would accept our nomination. So for those who argue that we have in effect chosen a president, for those who argue that we've chosen a president in the absence of the law, that is not the case. All that the Prime Minister has indicated is that the Governor General has consented to accept a nomination by the government when that time comes. We believe that the time is right for this. And as a political issue, I don't think that there's much need for any dissent. Certainly, successive prime ministers have spoken about having a Barbadian as a head of state. Our last prime minister, Frandell Stewart, quite boldly announced that he intended to take us to that status. Owen Arthur took the same position, and other prime ministers have taken the same position. And therefore, as far as we are concerned, this is really not an issue upon which we should spend too much time debating. And as I said, some people consider it to be a no-brainer. Who do we want to be a head of state? For my part, Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, I prefer to have a Barbadian as my head of state, and I prefer to take the oath and swear allegiance to my country, Barbados. Ambassador, with those words, I make myself available to questions from our audience.
Attorney General, thank you for a very complete and comprehensive explanation of this political move, of this political action, which I 150% endorse. I don't have to say how I feel about this particular issue. There's just one little thing that I would like to add. In the Prime Minister's press conference 2 Saturdays ago, she made it clear. She said that between now and November the 30th, the appointment of a Barbadian as the Barbadian head of state And she stressed on the importance of that to little boys and girls who look up and see that picture and will one day believe that they can be that person or that teenager who wonders why it is that we have an elected head of state that we didn't choose. She said, and then you begin to tell everybody that everyone is equal, but then why do you have some people better and more privileged than others? I suspect that those who would have known about the United States and its history, and particularly during the Jim Crow days, the concept of separate but equal raged in the United States. We must have not only just the head of state we can look up and see every day, but everyone must wake up in Barbados believing and trusting that me, or my children, or my children's children can become the head of state of Barbados. We also have a Barbadian dream. And I think that we should be faithful to that dream from where we sit. So with those words, those are my words and my sentiments. Even if I didn't want to believe it before, you convinced me now. So therefore, I am very much on board. Let us start though with the, I see some hands up already. I see some hands. I see some people in the chat. I am depending on my folks to tell me who in the chat first and who coming first. But one of the people that I see up there, whose hand is up and whom I know is Mr. Sam Clark. So Sam, I can start with you. Let me just give you, because I know you are one of the people who would call me and asked about this particular forum and about hosting this particular forum. So Sam, I'll start with you. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador and Mr. Attorney General, for sharing this stuff in the diaspora. I have a series of questions to ask the Attorney General with regard to the public. I think successive governments have constantly come to the diaspora and always promised the diaspora that they're going to check back, talk, look at the Constitution and allow us to vote, right? We see it. Barbados is over 350 years in the Westphalian democracy. It hurts us as diaspora to see Poreki banana republics, people like Afghanistan, their diaspora could vote. And we, Barbados, with over 350 years of democracy, we are unable to vote. And they kept saying it to us, we will have to go to the Constitution, how the Constitution had binded their hands. And I'm quite rightly so, they're correct. But now, since we're going down the road to a republic, it's incumbent that we, the diaspora, be taken into consideration why you are looking at changing and adapting the Constitution to a republic and allow us, the diaspora, that opportunity to vote. I would really like to see that be taken into consideration as you tinker with the Constitution into a republic. I have no problem. I think we should have left Queen Elizabeth a long time ago. And I'm all for a republic. But I want to advocate here for the diaspora for all having a vote, to have a voice in our Constitution in Barbados. Because time and time again, the diaspora being considered, our constituency being so good, where our human resources for Barbados, even our remittances are counted as foreign reserve with the Barbados Central Bank. So if given all those factions, would you tonight, Mr. Attorney General, take us down that road and let us go together and think about us when tinkering with that Constitution to become a republic and not leave us at the door like the red-headed stepchild. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. And I know that this is a burning concern for many in the diaspora, not just the US diaspora, but the diaspora in Trinidad, in St. Vincent, in England, in Canada, wherever Barbadians are to be found. I have to tell you, though, that while I understand what you are asking for, there's no connection between allowing Barbadians in the diaspora to vote and making a Barbadian our head of state. It appears to me that you are simply advocating that while we are making the changes to the Constitution, that we should also make such changes as are necessary to our electoral and boundaries legislation so as to be able to allow Barbadians to vote. I hear you, but Ambassador Lynch can tell you that there's something called cabinet responsibility, and I am able to speak with you all candidly about the matter of the Republican status, but I have no remit from cabinet, no remit from the Prime Minister to give any commitment to the diaspora about the matter of whether or when or if the diaspora will be able to vote. And that would really, I'd have to respectfully say, need to be the subject of another discourse.
Mr. Attorney General, I agree with what you're saying or whatever, but what I'm saying is we are tinkering with the Constitution of Barbados at this point.
Sam, I don't think, let me stop you there. I apologize, and I don't want to appear combative. I don't agree that what we're doing is tinkering with the Constitution. As Attorney General, I wouldn't know how to tinker with the Constitution. We have set out a particular course that we intend to take. That is, that we will make a Barbadian head of state. In order to be able to achieve that, we have to make limited changes to the Constitution, and those changes are going to be made by our Parliament. But we are changing an important part of the Constitution and something that has been with us from the time of independence. And to suggest that what we're doing is tinkering, I wouldn't agree with you on that score. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, let me, Mr. Attorney General, again. I'm not saying that you're thinking. I'm saying we're opening the book for change of the Constitution to accommodate.
And I understand that. And you're saying while we're changing this, we could as well do that.
Think about the diaspora as well. We've been promised this by successive governments over and over again. And they always say, oh, the Constitution have our hands tied. We have to look at the Constitution. So I'm just saying it out here, Lord, because this is what's going on. It's time that we need a chance to have a vote. And I think this is the opportune time, if ever there were a time, that we can embrace the diaspora. It will be now. Say we're going into a different level, a different era with republicanism as a republic. And it's only fear that we be considered as well. So that's all I'm asking. It might be not here now, but you can please take it back to the powers that be and to the Parliament to address our concerns. This is a burning issue within the diaspora all over the world. So that's all I'm saying, but I appreciate that you're coming here to educate us on the Republic, etc. But that is my dog in the fight. For me, Republicans should become long time. Actually, we should have gone from independence straight into the Republic. I don't care for no monarchy. So I am worried about us as Barbadians. We have a Barbadian. And then one question you say that you say that the current Governor General has agreed to become the president. Now, question will ask. So if another person say, I want this person to be the president, how do we handle that? Thank you very much. I rest my case.
Well, the proposal that we will be taking to cabinet and thereafter the Parliament would simply be that the majority of the body would make that selection. So you will take the individual. So the government would make a proposal. The opposition would make a proposal, and then we would simply vote on it. I mean, we have assumed that that at some point in time there will be dissent, and we can't always operate on the basis that the opposition and the government will be on even terms as far as who would be selected. So the system will allow for an election. That's why it's going to be an electoral college. We will actually elect The proposal would be that the vote be by secret ballot, and we are looking to see now which majority by which majority a person would be elected. Is it going to be a simple majority, or is it going to be a 2/3 majority? Those details have to be worked up now. Okay.
AG, thank you very much. I think that Sam, I hope your questions have been answered. The AG has made it abundantly clear what as far as his powers go and his commitment to the collective responsibility of cabinet, and then we're going to go from there. But the others that have been waiting and asking, the question that I have is from Peter Boyce. Peter Boyce has put his question in the chat. Peter, I'm going to let you ask your question yourself. So if you could unmute your mic and just put your question to the AG, go ahead, please.
Good evening, Attorney General.
Evening.
Ambassador, and to the participants. What unique status does your government find itself that allows you to make this transition to republicanism now, rather than, let's say, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or 30 years ago? And before you answer that, on behalf of my good friend Sam Clark, I think Sam just wanted to condition you on one thing that you will take back into consideration, that those who are Barbadians and still hold like a Barbadian passport would be at least considered for voting in the future in elections in Barbados. You don't want about just being a Yankee and got the Barbados passport, just voting in Barbados. So to clarify for Sam, I think that's what Sam needed. Just a little condition like that, and then we can take it from there. But please, what unique condition? Because I went to Allen School. I didn't go to Combermere like the learned ambassador here, right? I went to Allen School. And I thought, I recall, this is before Columbia Law School here in the States, but wasn't there something to do with a 2/3 majority that you enjoy now that allows you to make this unique transition?
Well, let me say that this will be the first time that a government has had a 2/3 majority. The Democratic had a 2/3 majority after the Barney. It was after the 86 election.
86 election.
We had a 2/3 majority in
99.
Our 99 election.
Yeah.
We have a 2/3 majority now. So a 2/3 majority is not as rare as you might think. And even in situations where you don't have a 2/3 majority, changes to the Constitution have still been effected. But I will agree, if that's where you want to go, I will agree that having an overwhelming majority in the lower house does strengthen the government's hand. But you have to remember that the Senate also has to deliver a 2/3 majority. And on several occasions since we became the government in 2018, we have been defeated in the Senate. So that even though you may want to contend that we're doing this now because we have a 2/3 majority in the House, we certainly don't have a 2/3 majority in the Senate. And I am quite certain we've had several bills defeated because the Senate did not pass them, or integrity legislation, which had constitutional amendments, was defeated in the Senate. So the mere fact that we may have 29 seats in the lower house does not make this a foregone conclusion. We still have to reach across the aisle to the independent senators and to the opposition to hopefully convince them that the amendments that we're making to the Constitution are desirable and practical. I think that we can. I think that philosophically, we're at that place where both houses will feel that we're going in the right direction. But we will need the support of 2/3 of the senators voting in order to be able to effect this change.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to read the next question because, and I encourage you folks, when you ask your questions, please just ask the question. Don't make a long speech because we got a lot of people lined up asking questions. There's one here from Eustace. Eustace says, I believe that Barbados is a member of 16 or so regional and international organizations. How will becoming a republic change our goals and objectives within these organizations? And would we have to renegotiate our membership in any of these organizations? AG.
The simple answer to that is no. it will have no impact whatsoever on our membership of the United Nations, on our membership of the OAS, of our status and membership in CARICOM or any other of the multilateral agencies. Your membership is as a country, as that legal entity called Barbados. So the fact that we may change who becomes head of state does not change the status of Barbados as a sovereign state. So simple answer, it will not require us to change anything.
Okay.
But let me say though, because I think it's obvious, moving to this state, and I don't mean country state, I mean having a Republican form and having a head of state as a president will cause us to make some consequential changes. So I apologize for using this example, but as Attorney General, you'll understand. Our prison is now called HMP Dodds, Her Majesty's Prison Dodds. The police force is the Royal Barbados Police Force. There are a number of things that are of that nature, which we will be required to change as consequential amendments. So while it will not require us to do anything at an international level, we do have to drill down into a number of things in Barbados and change those. So for example, I will no longer be a Queen's Counsel. I will no longer be one of Her Majesty's Counsel. I hope they will have something for me. I think our laws currently recognize that we would call that such a person senior counsel. So there are things like that that we're going to be getting rid of. But that's at a domestic level.
I hope they don't take it away from you and don't leave you with anything at all. But anyway, Joel Payne has asked this. He's asked, what protections will the public have under a republic? Under the current Barbados system of government, opposition parties are usually very weak, not just in Barbados, but other islands as well. Would this not just consolidate yet more power under the ruling party's administration?
Simple answer to that is absolutely not. We are changing the Constitution to provide for a president, but in no other respect will the Constitution be changed. So the status of the leader of the opposition, the right of the leader of the opposition to appoint 2 senators, the right of the leader of the opposition to be consulted when various other things are being done, those statutory obligations remain. None of those things will be changed. So in no sense will this consolidate the power in the hands of any administration or affect our structures. You know, I hate to say that this is symbolic, because you would then argue, well, if it's only symbolic, why bother to
do it at all?
But you know, I'm sure that Sir George, who happily is on this call, on this Zoom meeting, would remember the days that I only ever heard about of having to stand along the side of the road waving a Union Jack for various events. In my time, I've had to attend events at which some member of the royal family was present, and you know, there are some symbols that I think we do need to change, and we will change those symbols. We will try to reorient our thinking of who we are as a nation, but in no sense will this affect our structures. It will not affect the form of parliament, the powers of the leader of the opposition, or anything of that sort.
Okay. Our first lady here asking a question, Nicole Lewis. She says, I am interested in how citizenship will work under the Republic for those of us like myself who recently found out that we have Barbadian heritage and are interested in citizenship and reconnecting to our history and our culture in Barbados. How will citizenship work? Again,
none of those things will be affected. If you have a right to be a citizen under the law as it stands, that right will continue. That is not going to be affected at all. None of our structures are going to be changed. So any entitlements that you have, any protections under the law, any constitutional protections and freedoms, all of those things will remain.
Okay. Okay. There's a question from Hyacinth Roberts. Please give us a little more detail on how the Electoral College will differ from that of the one in the United States of America.
Oh my goodness, I don't even know if I'm qualified to do that. The Electoral College in the United States, and you're now forcing me to get out of my comfort zone. I'm only a CNN spectator on matters of US constitutional law. But the Electoral College make the determination once the election is completed of who the president will be based on how various electoral votes are allocated. This is an electoral college only from the point of view that it represents a body, a select body of people who will actually vote, who will actually cast a secret ballot to select who our president is going to be. The two, other than the name, the two things bear absolutely no relationship at all. Absolutely no relationship. It is true that at the end of each process, you will have a person called president. But I'm sure that if we could find someone better schooled in US electoral law, that you will recognize that the distinctions are vast. Okay.
I hope that explains it. I think I understood clearly. There are two questions. I'm going to put them together. Joan Small and Peggy Codrington. They're asking, what is the fiscal impact going to be on Barbados on this issue of the Republic? One, the printing of money, the value of our dollar, the value of our money, and will a republic have any bearing upon the value of the Barbados dollar?
Last question first. It will have absolutely no bearing on the value of the Barbados dollar. If the ambassador changed his name from Noah Lynch to, I don't know, Muhammad Ali, the name on his checkbook and credit cards will change, but it would not affect the balance on his bank account, which I know he will say it wouldn't matter because it's fairly close to zero. The question of the value of our dollar has to do with a whole variety of factors, but absolutely no connection at all to this particular issue of our governance. I will say that anytime that there's a perception, remember, of course, that our dollar is tied to the US dollar. But anytime that there's a perception that you have political instability or something in the country, certainly your reputation is going to suffer. And in countries where their currencies float, political instability can cause fluctuations in the value of the dollar. But the change that we're making is in no way representative or signify any kind of instability. And in any event, our currency is tied to the US dollar. So there's no opportunity for its intrinsic value to change. Yes, there will be some fiscal impact domestically. As I mentioned before, we will have to rename some of our institutions. So things like letterheads will change. We have to rename the Royal Barbados Police Force, and therefore the crowns that are worn on the gazetted officers, those are things that are going to be changed. The crowns that are worn on the uniforms of the Barbados Defense Force, those are things that will be changed. Will we change them all by November 30th? I don't think so. We hope to be able to have new insignia and things of that sort in fairly short order. And there's in fact a committee that's been established headed by Colonel Jeffrey Bostic, who is well seasoned of these things, to see what arrangements have to be made for that kind of transitioning. But in terms of the fiscal impact, we don't think it's going to be so significant as to be a drain on our economic resources at all.
Thank you very much, AG. I'm going to give the floor for a question to the Consul General in Miami, Naval Greenwich. CG Greenwich, go ahead.
Thanks, Ambassador. Good evening, AG.
Evening, Consul General.
How are you, my friend?
I am fine. I'm very well, thanks.
Good, my friend. My only question is a follow-up from one the ambassador just asked on behalf of one of our members of the diaspora in relation to citizenship, because that's a call that I had some time back as well, that our government had promised to change the legislation as it relates to the descendants of Barbadians. We're not only the first generation, but I think it was mooted that probably the second generation Barbadian would have been considered in that change of legislation. Can you enlighten us on anything of that as it relates to that, considering also that there is going to be some constitutional amendments?
Yes. First of all, let me say again that the two things are not connected. But I am happy to say that the work on a new Immigration Act is very, very far advanced. In fact, I'm quite sure that the new immigration legislation or new citizenship legislation is more or less complete. So those particular commitments that we have given to Barbados in the diaspora will very soon be enshrined in our law. But let me assure you that those matters are in no way connected to republicanism, to Republican status, to having a Barbadian as our head of state. But that work is very, very far advanced, and I believe, Ambassador, you might consider at some point in time having Minister Abrams, who's responsible for the Immigration Department, engaged in that very useful subject.
Mm-hmm. I mean, when the Prime Minister was here last, she made the point that at a town hall meeting that she wanted to extend it even beyond second generation Barbadians. But I will leave that to all of the changes and the immigration laws that you're changing. And I will invite Minister Abrams. We intend every month in these sessions to have a minister come to us and really explain some of the issues that Barbados is facing. There's a question here, AG, from Shirley Alder. She's asking, Mr. Attorney General, what is the term of the current Governor General? And what will be the term of the President? And what else will change in reference to our current statutes?
Thank you very much for that question, Shirley. When I began this presentation, I cited Section 28 of the Constitution, which says that there shall be a Governor General who shall serve at Her Majesty's pleasure. And what that means is that the Governor General would serve until Her Excellency the Queen ends that appointment. So as it stands, the Governor General has no set term, absolutely none. What we are proposing in the new arrangements would be for the President to be elected for a term of 4 years with the possibility of being reappointed for a further period of 4 years or less. So for the first time, the concept of the fixed term for a head of state will come into operation. But as it stands, the Governor General has no fixed term. We've had Governors General, I'm trying to think, Noel, who served the longest. It may well have been Sir Clifford Husband, who
Sir Clifford.
Yeah, who probably served for more than a decade.
Yeah, more than a decade.
Yeah, so there's no term. There's no fixed term for Governor General. Governor General serves until they either die or demit office. And demitting office is, in some instances, a personal decision on their part, or in other instances, done at the recommendation of the government to Her Excellency Queen Elizabeth. There was a second part to that question, though, Noel.
Yeah, she says what else will change in reference to our current statutes?
Well, okay, there are a lot of laws in Barbados that make reference to Governor General. And those references to Governor General have to be removed, and president has to replace that term. And we've given ourselves, well, we hope to be able to get it all done within a 2 to 3 year period, removing references to Governor General in all of our bylaws, in our laws, in all of our forms, in all of those places. So that transitional work will change, but in terms of the substance, there'll be no change in substance to anything that we currently do. Noel, I don't want to presume to be the chair, but I see a very interesting question from someone who has a concern as it relates to the urgency of, I don't know if you notice it, a question from Alicia.
AG, go ahead, man.
Good evening, Mr. Attorney General and Ambassador Lynch. I have a concern as it relates to the urgency and why it should be effective 30th November 2021.
Go ahead.
You know, for some people, any date is a good date, and for others, no date will be a good date. There's a saying, if something is good, it can't be done too soon. This announcement about our becoming a republic was made in 2020 at the reopening of Parliament. I think Parliament reopened in September of 2020. And it is on that occasion that Her Excellency announced in the throne speech that by Independence Day of 2021, we will be a republic. Now, that tells me that the announcement was made and we gave ourselves 14 months in order to achieve it. So I really couldn't agree that in any sense there's any appearance as though this is something that we're doing in a hurry. It is something that is important. It is something that has to be done with care, and we are taking our time on doing it, but we gave ourselves 14 months to do it. So I really am not sure what circumstances would present themselves in Alicia's mind to suggest that there's an urgency. Why should we wait until 2022 or 2023 or 2024? We set a time frame that I think I'm quite sure we can achieve it, and we are on course to achieving it. So I respectfully would have to disagree that there's any urgency to it. So I don't know if that helps.
Okay. Well, I think it certainly helped me. AG, there's a question from a Ricardo Bentham. He's asking, why is it necessary to have an electoral college to choose the president and not the people of Barbados to vote for the president?
Well, you know, the people of Barbados already vote for 30 parliamentarians, and they vote for, in a sense, you could almost say, Noel, that they vote for prime minister, though in law they don't. We think that in a situation where we have Barbadians voting to elect a parliament once every, well, we say every 5 years, but we know that in law and in practice it sometimes is, sometimes it isn't. But in those circumstances, we really can't see why we should have a plebiscite, go to a whole election to elect a president, especially where that president is not going to have ceremonial, is not going to have any executive powers. So imagine this. The government of Barbados puts forward somebody as president. The opposition then puts forward somebody as president. 4 or 5 in other political parties put forward somebody as president. And then we have to go through a whole electoral process. And the reality is this: if you subject the office of president to the popular vote, then what will happen is that it will become an exercise of politicking. And that's one of the challenges with referenda. When you have referenda, as has happened in sister Caribbean states, they had referenda on whether they would accept the jurisdiction of the Caribbean Court of Justice, something that everybody accepts. But what ended up happening is that it became another general election about who got roads, which minister didn't do this, which minister didn't do that. Issues that were completely irrelevant to the matter at hand. So I have to say that I would not be excited about going to the public to ask them to elect John Brown or Inez Green as president of Barbados, because it will become another political exercise. Everybody accepts. But what ended up happening is that it became another election about who got roles, which minister didn't do this, which minister didn't do that. No, we're having some.
I don't know where that's happening. Where that's technically. But you
okay.
Okay.
So
good.
I'm just making the point then that, you know, as happens, individuals' characters will get besmirched. So and so shouldn't become president because that is unseemly for electing someone to, or for selecting a person to our highest office in the land. It should be as much as possible above the political fray.
Okay. There was a question here, AG, but I think I suspect that what will be the final decision on legal matters and what will be our highest court? I thought our highest court was the CCJ, but you can.
None of, again, if it keeps coming up, it bears repeating. None of those structural things will change. All we're doing is changing our head of state from a governor general to a president. The head of state of Barbados will no longer be, in fact, let me be clear, my words are more precise. We're changing our head of state from the Queen of England to a Barbadian. We will no longer have a Queen's representative as Governor General. We're getting rid of that vestigial thing altogether. So none of our other structures will change.
All right, Mr. Thompson, David Thompson, who is the president of the Barbados Association of Washington, D.C., has a question. I give you the floor, sir.
Yes, sir. It's nice to meet you today, the Attorney General, but just a quick question. I'm in favor of the Republic. As you know, I'm born after independence. I may look a little pop down right now, but but things are okay. But as you mentioned, the first step to change is a limited change to the executive. What time period, like, government seeks to implement the Republic stamp on other institutions? For example, as you mentioned, the police force or the defense force, I see it in my eyes as critical. I know not my eyes, but also other Barbadians, that we not only move towards a republic on paper, but it should, you know, it should include in our day-to-day, you know, perspective. I mean, we should see it on a daily, you know, happening, you know, walking down the street on the bus, we you know.
Thanks, David. We anticipate being able to make those fundamental changes. In fact, we're committed to making those fundamental changes by the 30th of November. There's no doubt about it. When the 30th of November comes and we transition away from the Queen as our head of state, the very next day, in fact, effective on that day, we will no longer have a Royal Barbados Police Force. We will no longer have a Her Majesty's Prison Dodge. All of those things with the Queen, and those things that pay homage to the Queen, that recognize the Queen as our sovereign, all of those things will go. And that will happen by independence. What may take a little longer, and I'm just being pragmatic, what may take a little longer is the physical representation of those things. We have to, and that work is being done already. We're looking at redesigning a variety of things. We have to change the colors of the Barbados Defense Force, and by colors I mean colors in the military sense, not colors in terms of green and blue. We have to change the colors of the police force. We have to make some changes to the insignia. So those practical things are going to be done. Somebody is asking if we're going to change the Queen Elizabeth Hospital's name. I don't know if we will. It is called the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And I know you will know full well that we don't have private opinions in when you're in cabinet. So I will not try to give any private opinion, but it is not about walking up and down and changing everything. I mean, I think we have I don't know that we're going to necessarily change Princess Margaret School from being Princess Margaret School. I don't know that we're going to change Queen Liv Hospital to something else. That's a different issue. That is not, that is worthy of consideration, I suppose, but we're not going out to make those changes. We are, however, going to be changing our insignia, changing the names of some institutions rather than the names of buildings. Okay. AG, this one was sent in to me. Well, it's not in the chat. This person says that a British MP states that Barbados is changing to a republic because of the Chinese influence in Barbados and the Chinese influence in the Caribbean. How do you address that? Rubbish. That is. I'm not rubbishing the question. I'm rubbishing the assertion that was made by the British MP. And I mean, I don't know. I listen. There's no doubt that at an international level, there are countries that are concerned about the increasing influence of the Chinese government across the world. They're concerned about the influence of the Chinese government in, or what they perceive as the influence of the Chinese government in the Caribbean. But let's be practical. We are able to benefit from concessional financing from the Chinese government, from developmental assistance from the Chinese government, things that help our country to work. In my constituency, St. Joseph, we are beginning a program of stabilization of the Scotland district. Of course, the Scotland district is more than St. Joseph. It takes up 1/5 of our land mass. And we are borrowing 230 million Barbados dollars from the Chinese government so as to be able to do that work. Now, we can't borrow a cent from the US government. We can't borrow a cent from the English government. Now, we have certain developmental goals and developmental needs. And therefore, we do what is necessary, but we also do it in the best interest of our people. But it has absolutely nothing to do with becoming a republic. We've had a good relationship with China for many years. And this relationship is long-standing and beneficial. But we've had absolutely no discussion, nor would we ever have any discussion with a foreign state, China or any others, about whether Barbados should take a step in the direction of having a Barbadian head of state. That statement, I saw it reported in the press. I don't know if it was actually said, but it is nothing short of preposterous. Okay. Thank you, H. I saw it too. I thought it was more than ridiculous. The issue, as a matter of fact, the Prime Minister actually had a press conference in which she dealt with the whole issue of the Chinese influence, not only in the Caribbean, but she talked about where most of the government paper for the United States is held and where the current. You remember she said all that? Okay. That's right. The interview with the journalists. Right. And she said that the Chinese also have great influence in the United States itself, and most of the government paper of the United States is held in China. So I don't know what rubbish is that. Anyway, there's a question here from Joel Payne. Guyana as a republic has switched their president to be their executive president, whilst their prime minister have switched to be the ceremonial post. I don't know that is totally correct, but why did Barbados not follow this particular model? Because it's not the model that we choose to follow. We are very confident in our constitutional arrangements where the prime minister is the head of the executive together with a cabinet. In Guyana, the president of Guyana has more power, of course, than the prime minister. They choose to invert the relationship. That works for them. Trinidad, on the other hand, they have a ceremonial president while the Prime Minister remains as head of the executive. The same thing happens in Dominica. So we're not following a model because it's there. We're following a particular model that is tried, proven, and one that is within our constitutional understanding. So they are not suggesting that there aren't other models of government that we may have considered, but quite frankly, that is not what we are setting about doing.
Okay. AG, there's a question here. What activities are being planned nationally to commemorate the transition? Some of us would want to come home to join in the celebration, if there are any. Are there any celebrations?
Well, there are going to be commemorative events. Obviously, a lot of what we do going forward will be circumscribed by the impact that COVID and especially the Delta variant will have on our ability to gather as a people. I would have loved to have been able to have a gala event or many gala events associated with this particular transition, because I think it is perhaps the most important thing that we're doing for generations of Barbadians to come. But unfortunately, COVID is going to impact on that very heavily. And I know that all Barbadians in the diaspora and certainly the diplomatic community will be following the restrictions that we're having to put in place from time to time. So I would love every Bajan diaspora to come home to join in the celebrations, but at this point in time, I couldn't give you any clarity or any specificity on what particular kind of events we're going to be having. But that will come.
Thank you. There's a question from Alicia. She wants to know, why can't it be January 1 rather than November the 30th? With all those children, with all those children who are born after 2021, will any mention be made to the history of Barbados, that is Barbados independence, rather than the date that we became a republic? I fully understand what you're saying, Mr. AG, but why November the 30th? And somebody else had asked me as well, why wouldn't Barbados becoming a republic on November the 30th erase the concept or erase the notion of independence and replace it with a republic?
I don't think that it would erase the notion of being independent. We became independent on November 30th, 1966. In fact, I can think of no better day for symbolic purposes than a November 30th in whichever year we do it, because we are revisiting a particular event and making it whole. We're making it complete. In a sense, we're completing an agenda that was started over 5 decades ago. So for me, and certainly for the government, doing it on Independence Day to really concretize that declaration that we made in 1966, that we are a sovereign state. I can't think of a better day than Independence Day itself to do it, because we are, you could almost say we're putting the icing on the cake. For me, Independence Day will truly be Independence Day when we have broken this umbilical cord that we have with the English monarch. So I can think of no more symbolic day than November 30th, because we will really be finalizing our independence. As some of us would say, that is when we would become true independent, rather than fixing another arbitrary day at another part of the year.
Well, it keeps on popping up, because a question I see here is, a question that seems insignificant, the author says, but will there be 2 holidays? Will there be Independence Day and Republic Day? Or is it one? I'm just a messenger. I'm just a messenger, sir.
No, there's no plan to have another holiday. In fact, I think the economists in the country have worked out that we lose, for every day that we don't actually have the economy functioning, we lose about $20 million. So I don't think that there's a plan to have yet another public holiday in Barbados. Some people would like it, but I don't think that's on the cards. It will, I think November 30th will always be Independence Day. I don't think that we have to have another day called Republic Day. November 30th is Independence Day. We are adding to that. We are adding to the notion of independence. But I don't think it, as important as it is, I don't think that we need to have a separate celebration. You're on mute, Noella, so I can't hear what you're saying.
No. There's a question here. I want to know about bread and butter issues, kitchen table benefits that we are losing. And what are we gaining? I know we've lost a lot of clout when the UK joined the EU, but I know personally of one benefit since I was the beneficiary. What more are we losing? I think that's when the UK left the EU. That is it. Do you have a response to that? Are we losing any bread and butter benefits?
No.
As it relates to Great Britain or trading status with them, are we losing anything?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, I can tell you that, well, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I understand that a very senior member of the royal family intends to be present in Barbados for our event. That's what I'm hearing. There are no bread and butter issues that will be affected by this. None whatsoever. We have run Barbados in a way that I think successive governments can be proud of. I certainly am proud of how we've been handling the pandemic and these kinds of things. I'm proud of where we have come as a country, regardless of the administration. But we're now looking at perhaps a different issue, a softer issue, something that isn't bread and butter. Now, I understand that somebody would say, no, waste my time with this Republican talk. I want to hear about water in St. Joseph. Well, happily, we have water in St. Joseph now. For those of you in the diaspora who are from St. Joseph, we've licked that particular problem. So, I understand that some people would prefer to see us deal with fundamental issues, but, there are issues that are multi-generational. Roads will decay. Buildings that we will build will fall apart. But there's a sociology that we have to build. There's an acculturation that we have to achieve as a people, which I'm so happy that Sir George is on this call. Sir George headed PAHO. We've had Dame Nita run for the presidency of the United Nations. We've had Trevor Clark head WIPO in Geneva. We've had other eminent Barbadians who have aspired to and achieved the pinnacle of their careers. But somehow, Ambassador, the notion that we can aspire to being the most that we can be and be our own head of state eludes us. And that is why I say it's a softer sociological issue. How can we aspire to head the League of Nations, the United Nations, but somehow we can't aspire to be president and our own head of state? And for me, I don't think we will ever successfully achieve the pinnacle that we need to be unless we make ourselves whole. So it's not a bread and butter issue, but I believe that it will help to properly orient generations of Barbadians to come and tell them that being the best that we can be doesn't necessarily have to end at being prime minister, that we can be president and we can be the person who personifies the entirety of the state of Barbados.
There's a question here that should be linked to that. And I believe you've answered it already, but I'll ask. What advantages do we face if we are not part of the Commonwealth? In other words, what are the pros and cons of becoming a republic? I thought you'd address that all evening, but go please.
Well, we're not leaving the Commonwealth. Trinidad and Tobago became a republic, has not left the Commonwealth. India's republic has not left the Commonwealth. In fact, I think they contribute huge amounts of money to the Commonwealth Secretariat. Guyana, Dominica, just because we're changing our head of state doesn't signal a break from the Commonwealth at all. And in fact, we fully intend to remain within the Commonwealth and function within the Commonwealth structures. So removing the Queen as head of state does not signal an end to our relationship with the Commonwealth. And we have just given examples of countries who have broken that particular bond, but still remain active members of the Commonwealth.
AG, there's a question here that I think is interesting. This person wants to know, they are both citizens of Barbados and the United States. They have dual citizenship. Becoming a republic, does that put that that dual citizenship in general?
No, it does not affect any of those things. Absolutely not.
It does not.
Absolutely. Does not. Absolutely not.
Okay. And then there's one here. As ambitious as this plan is, have other symbolic things be considered? Like, for example, Barbados becoming a member of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, of the OECS?
You know, but the OECS is the only bloc that we have a trade surplus with. In other words, we export more to the OECS we export more to the OECS than the other way around. So we have a trade surplus with the OECS. We are a part of the regional security services. So we deal with security issues within the OECS arena. I know that this is something that has been discussed, it has been considered, but there are consequences to that. Being a part of the OECS would mean that we would no longer have our own central bank to deal with our currency arrangements. So we would then have to join the OECS central bank. So there are some things that we would have to give up. So at this point in time, I can say that there's no active consideration being given to us joining the OECS, but we are certainly trying to deepen our relationship with the OECS.
Thank you very much. AG, we are winding down. I think people have exhausted their questions. I wanted to, there's a question here. I'm going to give the floor to CG Greenidge, who wanted to make a comment before we close, before we start to wind down this session. CG Greenidge, please go ahead. CG Greenidge, I don't see him or hear him.
Okay, how you doing?
I'm here.
Go ahead. You wanted to make a comment.
No, the only comment I would make before I say briefly what I really want to ask the diaspora about right now, especially those who have been giving me all the assistance I need on my corridor, is that one of the things that puzzle me, AG, is a couple of months ago, we had Barbadians shouting about the last vestiges of the colonial system and removing the guy that was at the top of Broad Street. How do you differentiate between the two sets of circumstances? That is, in going to Republic.
Sorry, Nepal, the connection.
Can you hear me now, AG?
You lost a few words there. I'm hearing you for the most part, but we missed a few words.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is that a couple months ago, we had hundreds, if not thousands, of Barbadians clamoring and complaining about removing the guy that was at the top of Broad Street and saying that it was—
Oh, Nelson, yes.
Yeah, some of the last vestiges of the colonial system. I wanted that to be part of a colonial past. My question is, what's the difference? How do we differentiate between that and the Republican status as it relates to the colonial past?
Well, you know, I think the issue of the Nelson statue part and parcel of our colonial past, but it probably went deeper than that, and went into the whole issue of slavery and so on. So perhaps the two things are not exactly fungible, but I do believe that it would be difficult for any Barbadian living today to seriously argue that we should not have a Barbadian as the head of state. And Naval Ambassador, that's why I took the trouble of reciting the oaths that we take as Member of Parliament, as Attorney General, as Chief Justice, all of our high offices. We take an oath that is inconsistent with who we are as a people. On the preamble comes at the beginning of the Constitution, and it says, we declare ourselves to be a sovereign state. But at the end of the Constitution, where we have the oaths of office, we then swear that oath of allegiance to Her Majesty, the Queen. Now, I don't know how you go from declaring in firm notes, in firm tones, your sovereignty, and then when you get to the other end of that very important document, you acknowledge someone else as sovereign. So I don't connect this in any direct way with Nelson. I'm sure there's similarities, but I hope that becoming a republic and having a Barbadian head of state would certainly not find any dissenters among our people.
So George, Aline, so George, I saw your hand up. I'll give you the last question, the final question before we start into our.
I'd like to make the final, before you ask Sir George, because I would never want to come after Sir George. My respect for Sir George is too great to want to speak after you, Sir George. But Ambassador, I want to briefly ask members of the we're in dire need of some cheers right now. I know it might not be appropriate at your meeting, so I want to beg your indulgence and ask anyone who's offended, I apologize to them. But we need some assistance in getting some wheelchairs to Barbados for the hospital right now. And any of the members of the diaspora can send them to me. They can buy them on Amazon or whatever you want to do and send them to me at the consulate. I'll get them to Barbados as quickly as you can get them to me. So I want to urge you, beg you, you're free to call me at the office or call me on my cell. Everybody know my cell phone number, and we can make arrangements to assist Barbados at this trying time. Thank you, Ambassador. God bless.
Thank you. So George, please, you're on mute. So George, please go ahead.
What is your cell phone number? Well, never mind.
I will get that cell phone number to you, Sir George.
So George, my number is 305-984-9640, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, George.
Ambassador, it's not really, there are 3 points I wanted to make, not so much a question. One, thank you for arranging this. It's really very informative, very informative. I look forward to the next one. Second, AG Marshall, really, it is impressive, the clarity of your presentation and the convincing nature of the arguments you put forward. Anyone hearing you who could be in doubt about the relevance of the step being taken really could not have listened carefully. So I want to congratulate you on the nature of your presentation. And thirdly, when I looked up what a republic is, it says republic really consists of 2 things. One, a state in which the supreme power is held by the people and their elected representatives, and that the elected or nominated president rather than a monarch. In fact, Barbados has done the first part already. We're just completing the process really now. So the question I would have to ask is this, do you feel, A.G. Marshall, that the concern is about the substance of it, that anyone is against the importance of symbolism, or is there concern really with the process by which has been followed? Because I don't think any Barbadian can be against the symbolism that is being invoked in this instance. No one can be against the symbolism of having a Barbadian head of state. What is your feeling?
Well, Sir George, first, let me thank you for your very kind comments. All I can say is that I'm happy if I've been able to bring some clarity to the issue, and I'm happy for the opportunity to have done so. My sense of the, I don't want to call them murmurings because that may seem disrespectful. My sense of the feeling of dissenters, you're quite right. I don't think that any of them are saying that we should not replace the Queen as our head of state with the president. I don't get the feeling that they're saying that. The criticisms that have been made have been in relation to process. Some are saying that we appear to be doing it in a hurry. Others are saying that we've lacked consultation. Still others are saying that we should go to a referendum. I would imagine that everybody who has an objection, that they are of some merit, and I wouldn't want to dismiss any of them. But, you know, I do feel that one of the burdens of being in government is that sometimes you have to be the decider. And being the decider requires that in addition to exercising the power of decision, that we try to bring along everyone with us so that nobody feels as a particular thing is being jammed down their throat. We set up a committee so that committee had the responsibility of working through all of the issues. There's not a single politician on the committee, not one, because we wanted the buy-in of the public, and we didn't want it to be tainted by a political process. That committee has had the benefit of the finest legal advice available in Barbados in terms of what the structure would look like. And I think that we're at the point where we just have to talk with those people who are finding fault, who are finding objection. But I'm comforted by the words of the Irish Prime Minister. He met with us when we first became the cabinet. And he said that if everybody is agreeing with you, then you gotta be doing something wrong. The dissent that we are finding is not so vociferous that we feel that we need to wheel and come again. And to some extent, I think that we've been able to capture some of those dissenting voices and use that as an opportunity to talk people through any of their discomfort. And the Prime Minister has indicated that she wants me to speak in the same way I've spoken to this gathering, to members of the public at home. In fact, she'll probably chastise me for speaking to you before I spoke to them, to try to help people to walk with us through it and to give them the level of some comfort.
If you permit me, Ambassador,
Sure.
this. I would stress this important aspect of symbols. Symbols are important for our people. Symbols are of critical, that's why we have flags, that's why we have anthems, that's why we have all of these things. And the symbolism of a Barbadian head of state, to my mind, that is something that should be driven home over and over and over again. And all these other things are really, procedural matters that have to be gone through, can be explained. If I were to emphasize, I would hark over and over again how critical it is, this symbolic aspect of the change. And as Lady Macbeth would say, if it were done, to our best, were done quickly.
So George, on that note, just let me say the Prime Minister a couple of weeks ago talked about the issue of whether or not we are doing this with undue haste. And she made reference to the fact that from the time she was in first form in secondary school, when the Cots Commission came out in 1978, that we had already talked about this. Similarly, the discussions that went on to the Ford Commission in the 1990s, and then there were discussions when the Barbados Labour Party was last in government through each of their terms, 1999 to 2003, and 2003 to 2008, and it was put into every manifesto, and the party was elected. She also talked about Prime Minister Stewart, and that he wanted to move the country in this way to having a Barbadian head of state and to become a republic by the 50th anniversary of independence, which he did not complete. Mr. AG, I really want to thank you for your very clear, open, and sincere presentation this evening. I remember going to cabinet and hearing one author say, clarity of thought, sense of purpose, and expected outcomes. And I think you were clear. Your mind was clear. I think your presentation was impeccable. I don't know why any Barbadian would leave here tonight and not want to be a part of a republic or not want to have a Barbadian as our new head of state. I close with the words of the Prime Minister. She said, "My people, we have come too far as a nation. And what we are simply trying to do is to close the discussion on independence. We are not trying to take away Mr. Barrow's legacy, as some people may fear. Far from that, we are trying to complete his legacy. We are trying to finish what he would have wanted to finish if circumstances would have allowed him to do so in 1966. I have every confidence that the man I knew would have wanted to be able to have a Barbadian as head of state, but we understood then and that we are moving a nation from a deep colonial past into a bright, independent future." Those are the words of the Prime Minister. I echo those sentiments. Those of you who joined us this evening were enlightened by the presentation. I really do need to thank you for being a part of this exercise. The Prime Minister has constantly said that the diaspora is critically important to nation building in Barbados. And maybe we haven't done as complete a job as we should have in the past in terms of reaching out to our diaspora, but it is my intention and my work here to do as much as I can to bring that diaspora close and more cohesive as we intend to build a better and brighter Barbados. And I really want to thank you this evening for joining us. AG, as usual, brilliant. But thank you very, very much. I also want to thank the staff of the Embassy of Barbados, Christabel Reese, Michelle Gibbons, Tricia Graves Staggs, for the work that they did in putting this together. I also want to thank Mr. Charlie Young in Barbados, the folks who behind the scenes make these things happen and really do all of the groundwork. Thank you very much for what all you've done. And I also want to thank those who have joined us from the other consulates, particularly those in Miami, CG Greenwich. Thank you. I didn't see CG Holder. I hope you saw CG Carter, Sonia. I think I saw Sonia as well. But thank you all for joining us. Folks, have a great evening. Any other questions? This has been recorded. We will share it with you. Any other questions and queries you have, we will continue. But continue to talk to your people, get these names so that we can expand this database. We're up to like 5,000 or so plus now. We want to have a much greater database than this. But thank you all for joining us this evening, and go with God. Thank you, AG. Thanks a million.
Have a good night, folks. It's been great to be here.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.